Hey everyone, dear friends, this is Drake on the Crime Story Diaries channel. Today we'll be examining a disturbing case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. 12-year-old Tia Lee Palmer had her whole life ahead of her, but tragically, a horrific fate awaited her. An ordinary teenage girl fell victim to a terrifying act of violence. Her biological mother, sensing a real threat to her daughter's life from her husband, placed Tia Lee in a child protection center, hoping it would save the girl and give her a chance at a bright future. However, as it later turned out, the good intentions of strangers only worsened the situation for young Tia, as her loved ones affectionately called her. Soon, a terrible tragedy occurred. Tia Lee's father forced Cindy Palmer, the girl's biological mother, to place her daughter under the care of Child Protective Services. The woman believed she was doing the right thing, as circumstances required her to save her daughter. Being a victim of domestic violence herself, she sought to protect her child from a similar fate. The complex family dynamics made it impossible for her to properly raise the girl. Tia Lee grew up to be a troubled child, often running away from home to escape parental conflicts and prone to delinquent behavior. In January 2015, by decision of the Child Protection Center, the 12-year-old girl was sent to live with a wonderful family residing in the quiet town of Chambers Flat, about a 40-minute drive from Brisbane, Australia. This cozy little corner had a population of around 500 people. Tia Lee's foster parents were the Thorburn couple, the head of the family, Rick, his wife Julene, and their two sons, 19-year-old John and 18-year-old Trent. By that time, the girl had already gone through several foster families, as her difficult personality created challenges. Some considered Tia Lee quite confrontational. The Thorburn family was no exception. The girl was unhappy about the prospect of living with two much older teenage boys, but she had no choice. Rick and Julene had been married for over 25 years at the time of her arrival. Rick used to work as a truck driver, but had to switch to a lighter vehicle due to a serious back injury. That's how he started a business selling fast food from a van and also owned his own horse farm. Julene ran a home daycare. The family was considered very decent, respected, and exemplary in all circles, which is why Child Protective Services chose this particular household for Tia Lee. For 4 months, it seemed that the child had settled into her new family and continued to live there until the tragic events that followed. The girl attended Morrison State High School, located just a 20-minute drive from home. Life appeared to be improving, with everyone getting used to Tia Lee and her getting along with her new housemates. But in reality, not everything was as rosy as it might have appeared from the outside. October 30, 2015, began as a typical day in the Thorburn household. Rick drove his foster daughter to school and returned home to work on his car. A few hours later, the school called and informed them that Tia Lee had not shown up for classes. The girl had run away from home before, having a difficult childhood and a habit of escaping from her problems. But this time, she could not be found, although she usually quickly returned on her own or was located. Rick posted on social media, describing the situation and asking anyone who knew Tia Lee's whereabouts to respond. However, no one answered the call. The foster family knew that the girl was eagerly anticipating Halloween, which was just a few days away. Tia Lee had even prepared a costume and was upset by Tia Lee's disappearance right before the holiday. So the Thorburns contacted the police, and the teenager was declared missing. However, no one really searched for the girl, believing she would soon return after another runaway attempt. Less than a week had passed since the foster child disappeared. In the early morning of November 5, 2015, the police received an alarming call. A local fisherman informed the emergency services that he had found a body in the coastal reeds in the shallows of the Pimpama River. This location was approximately 30 kilometers south of Tia Lee's last known whereabouts a week earlier. By this time, the body had significantly decomposed, likely aided by local wildlife and climate conditions. The police officers who arrived at the scene could not even accurately determine the gender of the deceased person, let alone identify them. They could only roughly establish that it was a teenager. The body was in a terrible state, with no clothing except underwear. The grim find was sent for an autopsy and forensic examination, comparing the body to the list of missing persons in the area. Law enforcement officials surmised that the deceased could be 12-year-old Tia Lee, who had disappeared about a week ago. The suspicion was later confirmed by DNA analysis in a laboratory, and the police's worst fears were realized. During the examination, experts concluded that the injuries initially mistaken for animal bites were most likely inflicted by a person. The girl had become a victim of horrific violence. The case was reclassified as a murder, and an investigation began. Considering that Rick Thorburn was the last person who had likely seen Tia Lee alive, law enforcement officials started their investigation by talking to him. From the very beginning, he aroused suspicion with his behavior and contradictory statements.
Do you have anything to do with the death of Tia Lee Palmer?
Absolutely not.
All right. How was her demeanor that morning?
She was on key. She was happy, really sprightly. And I was sort of pleased that she was happy that day. So I just thought, we're going to have a good day.
Mate, is there anything you can tell me about this matter?
Nothing at all. I dropped her off.
But all of this had yet to be proven and thoroughly verified. Investigators also decided to speak with other members of the foster family, hoping that one of them might have additional information. However, questioning the relatives did not yield any useful insights. Everyone confirmed the head of the family's account that he had taken the daughter to school at 7:30, and no one had seen the missing girl since. The detectives then went to the school to verify the Thorburn statements, and here they managed to obtain valuable data. Law enforcement officers interviewed over 100 people's 7th grade students, Tia Lee's classmates, her friends, and teachers. It turned out that on that day, no one had seen the girl come to class or even show up near the school. After reviewing the footage from surveillance cameras outside and inside the school on the day of the disappearance, the detectives were convinced that Tia Lee had not come to school and had not been seen near the entrance, which seemed strange. Where could the girl have gone then? However, 2 female students, friends of Tia Lee, revealed that their classmate had serious problems in her foster family. One of them reported that Tia Lee had begged to be taken to her home because the Thorburns were mistreating her, and trouble awaited her. But due to her young age, the friend could not make such decisions for her family and bring Tia Lee to her house. Moreover, she did not think the situation was that serious. Shortly afterward, Tia Lee died a horrible death. This happened just a week before her disappearance. The friend suggested that the tragedy might have been related to problems in the family, although Tia Lee did not specify exactly what her foster parents were doing to her. After talking to other students, the police realized that apart from the foster family, Tia Lee had no one else who could have harmed her. Suspicions about the Thorburns intensified, so the investigators continued to scrutinize this family. None of the foster relatives categorically admitted to the accusations of domestic violence, claiming that Tia Lee had made everything up, just as she had done previously when running away from other families and complaining about them. The police verified this information and found that the girl indeed had a tendency to run away and was a troubled teenager. All the people close to the Thorburns and their neighbors characterized them as an exemplary family. Many took their children to the Thorburns' home daycare, and no one could believe that such decent people were capable of hurting Tia Lee. The general opinion was that the girl had simply run away, as she had done before, concocted a story about mistreatment, and actually got into trouble and fell victim to an attack. Therefore, the police had no grounds to suspect the Thorburns and began looking for the cause of the murder elsewhere. Meanwhile, the foster family continued running their home daycare. During the investigation, detectives also questioned about 300 registered sex offenders in the area who might have been involved in a sexually motivated attack. But this also failed to provide any leads or even the slightest clues as to what had happened to the teenager. Most of them had alibis, and some no longer even lived in the area. No suspects were identified among these individuals. On December 4, 2015, about 100 meters from where the body was found, a shoe was discovered that likely belonged to Tia Lee, as well as her school backpack. This story gained such widespread publicity that it attracted considerable public attention. It was covered by numerous television channels in Australia, so soon the whole country learned about the case.
Queensland police have identified a body found on the Gold Coast as 12-year-old Tiali Palmer. She hadn't been seen since last Friday as she made her...
Several pickets were held before the funeral, with people demanding that those responsible for the girl's horrific death, which she clearly did not deserve, be found. The biological mother of the deceased organized protests and demanded answers from the police about her daughter's death, appearing on television to draw public attention. The woman was outraged that Child Protective Services had not taken care of Tiali. Largely because of this, over 600 people attended the girl's funeral, most of whom had never even met Tiali in life, but came to pay their respects and express their indignation. Many of those mourning the deceased were dressed in white and purple t-shirts with hearts and the girl's name. Purple was her favorite color. About 400 white roses were placed on her coffin, and purple balloons were released into the sky as the hearse took the body for a private cremation. 5 months had passed since the day of Tiali Palmer's murder, but law enforcement officials still had no serious leads. A reward of 250,000 Australian dollars, about $160,000, was announced for any information that could assist in the investigation.
The personal people who know something about this are too loyal to whoever they're helping. So I'm guessing that money's not really going to be an issue.
Tiali's mother appeared on television, pleading for help, urging witnesses to come forward and the perpetrators of this terrible crime to confess. In addition to the monetary reward, the police guaranteed exemption from prosecution for any accomplice who had not committed the crime themselves and would be the first to provide important information. However, even this did not help uncover anything new. The police received several calls from concerned citizens, but they led nowhere. No one could provide useful information. The summer of 2016 arrived, and the police still did not even have a prime suspect. Detectives interrogated one criminal after another, those with a history of sexual violence. The state of decomposition of the body at the time of discovery did not allow forensic experts to obtain any leads, so investigators did not even know what exactly had caused the girl's death. The only assumption they managed to make was that Tiali had been strangled, as evidenced by a broken hyoid bone. The most likely theory at the time was that the girl had been abducted by a random motorist near the school, as the area where parents drop off their children was not covered by surveillance cameras, so anything could have happened there. But this was merely a theory of the police. The sum of 250,000 Australian dollars for information that would help apprehend the perpetrator still remained unclaimed. Only in May 2016, after more than 6 months of persistent work, did the State Police Department receive an anonymous call with valuable information. The unknown informant stated that he had something to tell about Tiali and the Thorburn foster family. According to him, the Thorburns had been looking for a troubled child from the very beginning in order to receive increased benefits for her, and they had no real feelings for Tiali. For them, it was purely a mercenary interest. The anonymous caller also confidently claimed that all members of this family could have been involved in what had happened to the girl. Unfortunately, the informant did not provide any further details and hung up the phone. Establishing his identity to obtain additional information proved unsuccessful. But thanks to this call, the police decided to return to the version of the foster family's involvement in the murder. After all, at the beginning of the investigation, they had already received information from students about domestic violence in the Thorburn household, but at the time, these allegations could not be confirmed and were dismissed. Now the detectives turned their attention to the foster family once again. While verifying the words of the anonymous informant, the police again spoke with some of the students at the school. One of Tiali's friends shared that the girl had confided in her about an intimate relationship with the younger Thorburn son, 19-year-old Trent, who was considered a local heartthrob. Tiali, due to her young age, did not fully understand what was happening and thought they had a genuine relationship, as Trent assured her. The girl was even in love with him and admired the horses on the farm. But at the same time, she was terrified of Trent and his entire family, so she wanted to run away from them. it is likely that in addition to sexual abuse, there were instances of brutal physical abuse against Tia Lee in the house. These statements from the student required thorough verification, but repeated questioning of the Thorburn family members yielded no results. They all categorically denied any suspicions and accusations, especially regarding molestation of a minor. However, due to serious suspicions, the Thorburns' permission to operate a home daycare was revoked, and their license to host foster children was suspended. Law enforcement officials installed listening devices in the foster family's house. Almost daily, they received shocking information that shattered the image of a decent family that the Thorburn couple and their sons carefully maintained. In particular, it was discovered that on October 29, 2015, the family held a meeting, and the next day, Tia Lee disappeared. At this meeting, Trent told his parents that the girl had a suspiciously aching stomach, which raised concerns for Rick and Julene about the possibility of the 12-year-old being pregnant. As it turned out, the foster parents had learned about the younger son's intimate relationship with Tia Lee shortly before her disappearance. Trent had relations with the girl when no one was home. During the wiretapping, the young man admitted that he had repeatedly engaged in sexual intercourse with his foster sister for almost 10 months, practically the entire period she had been under the Thorburns' care. Eventually, 19-year-old Trent approached his parents when he suspected that Tia Lee might be pregnant. He was afraid that their relationship would become known, as the 7-year age difference effectively made him a criminal. In response, Rick told his son not to worry, promising that he would deal with the problem himself. As evidenced by the overheard conversations of the Thorburns, the girl was terrified of her foster father. She was most afraid of being alone with him. It seems these fears were not unfounded. Other family members also treated Rick with considerable trepidation, as behind the mask of a decent family man hid an extremely cruel and dangerous individual, which was later confirmed. That same evening, after the meeting, Rick kicked the rest of the family out of the house, leaving him alone with his foster daughter. When a few hours later, as agreed, everyone returned, Tia Lee was nowhere to be found. When asked where the girl had gone, the head of the family replied that she had run away and the problems with her were now solved. She would definitely not tell anyone anything. The relatives suspected that Rick had killed Tia Lee as he was too confident in her silence. When one of the brothers tried to enter the girl's room, his father forbade him in a threatening manner. None of the Thorburns dared to contradict Rick, so they all simply forgot about the incident. It became evident that the story of Rick driving his foster daughter to school, after which she disappeared, was a complete lie. In reality, he could not have done this, as Tia Lee was no longer in the house at that point and was most likely dead. But what exactly Rick had done to her remained a mystery. He concealed this information even from his own family. During the wiretapping, detectives repeatedly heard the head of the family instructing his relatives on what to say and how to behave so as not to arouse suspicion from the police, and they all obediently complied. Law enforcement officials initially summoned the Thorburn sons and their mother for questioning, believing they would be the easiest to crack. And indeed, as investigators began to reveal the information they had, the interviewees gradually started to talk. The longer the detectives communicated with them, the better they understood what was really happening in that house.
The last time that you saw Tia Palmer alive, when was it?
In her bedroom, sitting on her bed.
Okay.
I said goodnight to her there.
Yep.
And expressed to her that maybe she needed to stay there and put herself to sleep when she was ready, sort of thing.
And where was Rick?
I think he was outside the kitchen door, like waiting for me to come back outside.
Okay. Was there anyone else in the house?
Nobody else in the house, no.
And then you left?
So the exact words, it's all taken care of or something. So what do you mean by that? So don't worry, don't ask any questions, I've taken care of it. And I went to go to her room and he said, don't go in there.
You know, you said that he was a bit worried about what might happen to Trent.
Yeah.
So we're going from that to killing her while you're out.
Yeah. No, I would never have left the house if I thought that. I had no indication, no feeling that he would do something like that at all.
I wanted to try and tell the police that I'd been told what had happened. But I knew that if I did that, I wouldn't make it 10 steps out of the door. That he would do the same to me. I wish it didn't turn out this way. I wish none of this ever happened.
Yes.
Rick had arranged everything as if he were trying to protect his family. After carefully reviewing the footage from surveillance cameras near the school, the police were convinced that Rick Thorburn had gone to great lengths to conceal his crime and confirm his fabricated story. That morning, he had indeed driven in the direction of the school, and his car was captured by several cameras. But not a single frame showed the girl exiting the vehicle. After this, accusations and suspicions rained down on the Thorburn family. Julene and Joshua were accused of providing false testimony and attempting to mislead the investigation. Trent was suspected of sexual assault, and Rick was suspected of premeditated murder and trying to conceal the crime. The detectives concluded that the man had killed Tia Lee and deliberately mutilated the body to complicate its identification. This partially worked, as initially, even the gender of the victim could not be determined. But fortunately, thanks to DNA analysis, the identity of the deceased was confirmed. Rick had apparently not been aware of the possibilities of such tests. Law enforcement officials also had strong reasons to believe that the head of the family was involved, not only in Tia Lee's murder, but also in the brutal physical and sexual abuse of all the children, including his own. In total, 9 charges were brought against Rick, some of which did not even pertain to the deceased girl. Trent was accused of incest and providing false testimony. The family car, which, as it turned out, had been sold immediately after Tia Lee's disappearance, was confiscated from the new owner for inspection. Blood stains were found inside. All these events took a toll on Rick's health. On the day of his detention, he lost consciousness in the detention center. The man's condition was so serious that doctors had to put him into an induced coma. But after a few days in the hospital, Rick regained consciousness. Doctors suggested that he had deliberately provoked the deterioration of his health by taking some medications. But fortunately, this scoundrel did not manage to evade responsibility for his crimes. Finally, all the members of the Thorburn family stood trial. The cynicism and cruelty of their actions shocked the public. People openly wished for retribution against these inhumans capable of such brutality towards a defenseless girl. The prosecution was so devastating that the defense's arguments were virtually ignored. Julene and Joshua pleaded guilty to all charges and agreed to testify against Trent and Rick. The jurors, almost without deliberation, found all the members of this family to be real monsters, guilty of various crimes. Joshua was sentenced to 3 months in prison. His mother received 1.5 years for false testimony. Trent, who also confessed to everything, got 4 years for incest, lying to the investigation, and attempting to obstruct justice. The mother and son are now free, even Trent, who had raped Tia Lee. He was released in 2018 after spending only 16 months behind bars. But the cruelest figure in this case, Rick, who during the trial admitted his guilt in Tia Lee's murder, hiding her body in the river to save the reputation of his son, and the whole family, as well as other crimes, received a life sentence in May 2018 with the right to parole no earlier than 20 years. The shock caused by the circumstances of this case led not only to public outrage and media attention. The legislative system of Australia undertook a review of the laws concerning the principles of protecting children placed in care. Stricter checks were introduced, aimed at identifying potential criminals among candidates for foster parents, especially those who already had problems with the law. In addition, several new provisions were added that pertained to troubled teenagers and families wishing to adopt or foster them. The tragic story of Tia Lee Palmer is a horrifying example of how the child protection system can fail, and the people who were supposed to ensure safety and care instead become criminals. The girl, who already had a difficult childhood, fell into the hands of monsters who took her life. This case shook Australian society, forcing a review of the laws and procedures related to child custody. It became evident that stricter background checks on potential foster parents were needed, especially those with a criminal past. The perpetrators were punished, but whether the punishment was sufficient is a matter of debate. The most terrifying aspect is that the actual prison terms for most of them were surprisingly short. Is this fair to the memory of the deceased girl? Shouldn't the justice system be harsher on those who committed such a heinous crime? Let this chilling story be a reminder to all of us that it is the responsibility of adults to protect children, and the responsibility of society to ensure that this protection is reliable. Only then can we say that we are doing everything possible to ensure that no more children suffer the way Tia Lee Palmer did. Thank you for your attention to this work. Support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. I invite you to discuss this story in the comments. All the best.